Hi, thanks for watching this installment of Finding Jesus in Genesis. We're focusing on the flood today. That's Genesis chapter 7, verse 6, all the way through verse 24. If you haven't read that, go on ahead and pause this video right now so that you can read those verses and then come back. We'll be waiting on you. And welcome back. So the memory verse, if you want a memory verse, is Genesis chapter 7, verse 23b. That's the second half of the verse. And it says this: "Only Noah was left, and those who were with him in the ark." Now, so Noah is 600 years old. It's been a full 100 years after his sons were born, and the ark was finished. And Noah and the 7 other members of his family went inside the ark with an arsenal of animals that would make any zoo on the planet drool with envy. Noah didn't have to cajole or herd them in. God himself commanded these animals to go inside, a total of 14 of every clean animal and bird, a total of 2 of every unclean animal, and an assortment of all the creepy, crawly things you can think of, all boarded this mammoth of a structure. Now, it's going to be 7 days of being safe and secure inside the ark before the world Noah knew would begin to be destroyed because of its wickedness. And Scripture doesn't record it, but surely everyone noticed the stream of wood that Noah had been bringing to his construction place as the world is coming to an end while this ark is being constructed. Surely they noticed when a pair of zebras and cheetahs and gorillas moseyed past their front door on the way to Noah's place. And if not, I'm sure that the 14 buffalo and giraffes and reindeer caught their eye. And then 1 week went by with no crazy-looking animals. 1 week with no saws, no hammers, nothing. Just silence. 1 week with nothing but waiting. The very same way that Noah was waiting. And there they were. They're inside the ark with every type of animal and bird in existence. And we can assume that many of them were not fully mature to save space. We can assume that several of them settled into their pen and started hibernating. We can also assume that Noah was wishing that someone would invent an aerosol can of air freshener, I'm sure, to remove some of this stench. I wonder what Noah and his family felt as they were inside this ark with all these animals, many of which they'd probably never even seen before, standing at the door. Can you picture that? The only sunlight that you see coming from the outside is streaming in through this one huge door built into the side of the ark. And it's been a week of waiting. Maybe occasionally one of them went outside to grab one more keepsake. But ultimately, Noah was probably thinking, hey, God, I trust you in everything, but you said that in 7 days it's going to rain. And honestly, I don't know how well we're going to float with that big door on the side of the ship. Do you want me to go outside and close that up? And after that, maybe I could make a ladder. And then, boom, verse 16 says that the Lord himself shut them inside. And then it started. And I'm not talking about the rain. The phenomena described in Genesis chapter 7, verse 11, is especially frightening to me because while I've encountered rain and thunderstorms, tropical storms, even a hurricane or 2 or 3 or 4 or 8, I've never had the earth itself vomit out water so violently that it contributed to a flood that covered the highest mountains. That's a lot of water. I imagine it must have consisted of earthquakes and upheavals of terrain and volcanic explosions that have gone unmatched in severity ever since. And then, actually at the same time, floodgates of water poured from the skies that must have rivaled Niagara Falls worldwide for 40 days and 40 nights. There's something unique about the 7th chapter of Genesis that I think we should take the time to look at. I mentioned a word in one of the reviews of the first 2 chapters of Genesis, and that word that we would all do well to remember is the word recapitulation. It was used to describe the repeated stories or multiple versions of the creation. Each version told the same story over and over again, but with a different focus each time. And the same thing happens in this chapter about the flood. We're given the fact that Noah and his family entered the ark, and then the flood starts no less than 4 times. It's true. Genesis chapter 7, 1 through Genesis chapter 7, verse 6. That talks about the start of the flood. Genesis chapter 7, verse 7 through 10. And then Genesis chapter 7, 11 through 12. And then Genesis chapter 7, verse 13 through verse 17. Each of those sets of verses says the same thing in a different way or with a different focus. So, since it must be important, let's repeat it. Noah and his family entered the ark, and then the flood started. But that's not all. We're also given a recapitulation or a recap that the devastating waters were deep and completely covered the earth. Look for yourself. Genesis chapter 7, verse 17, verse 18, verse 19, and verse 20. It's repeated 4 times. Again, here is the focus we need to remember. The devastating waters were deep and completely covered the earth. And again, last time for chapter 7, we have another recapitulation, another recap of the fact that everything and everyone died. There were no survivors. Look for yourself. Genesis chapter 7, verse 21, verse 22, verse 23a, and then verse 23b. So we get the pattern by now, of course. There's a point to be made that we should not forget. Everything and everyone died. There were no survivors. But there's an exclamation point to this chapter that is not recapitulated. In fact, it stands out because it is so direct and obvious to the reader. The profoundly simple statement is this: only Noah was left and those who were with him in the ark. Simply stated, it's only said one time, and the fact that it's not said over and over and over again makes it stand out. That is really important. So putting it all together, what is the focus of the 7th chapter of Genesis? It is this: Noah and his family entered the ark, and then the flood started. The devastating waters went deep and completely covered the earth, and everything and everyone died. There were no survivors. Only Noah was left, and those who were with him in the ark. Let's change gears for just a minute. Look in Matthew chapter 24, verses 36 through 39. We're given a glimpse of what the last day on earth will look like. Quote, "For as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day when Noah entered the ark, and they were unaware until the flood came and swept them all away." Friends, I'm not going to use any verbal judo this time to make a point in this particular section. I've been doing that the last couple of installments of Jesus in Genesis. It's important, so I'm just going to be blunt. There is an ark today. And I want you to hear me on this. You want to be in that ark, because eventually there will be another flood. And you need to be in that ark before the flood begins. Because this flood will not be water. This flood will be fire. And you want to have entered that ark when that flood starts, because that devastating fire will be deep and it will completely cover the earth. Everything and everyone will die. There will be no survivors. The only ones left will be those who were in the ark. So can you get in this ark? Can I get in this ark? The people who died in the flood were not allowed in Noah's ark. That ark had a hole in its side that God himself closed shut, and nobody else could come in. And there's another ark that has a hole in its side. And the Apostle Thomas can tell you himself that hole is not closed shut because he physically put his hand in it. That hole in this other ark is still open. You still have time to come inside this other ark and be saved. Well, you may ask, where do I find this other ark? That's a good question, except for this fact. This other ark isn't a thing. It's a who. And who is it? That's Jesus. Thanks for watching this installment of Jesus in Genesis. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Share it, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. I really do appreciate you watching. I'm Bob Baulch with the That's Jesus channel. Be blessed.